Nigel Farage is back, and he's pulling no punches. In an explosive new video, Farage accuses Labour's Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves of being completely out of touch with Britain's rural communities, alleging that Labour's new budget will crush family farms. The issue at hand? Labour's latest inheritance tax cap, a new limit of £1 million on tax relief for inherited farmland. Farage warns this cap could be the end of generations-old farms across the country. That's right, folks. Labour's plan might mean financial ruin for family farms, and Farage is determined to expose the full impact. We've got the clip showing him on the ground at a farm set to be hit hard by this policy. Get ready. What Farage reveals in this interview will have you questioning if Labour truly understands life beyond city borders.
So I've just arrived at a 300-acre family farm. It's in its third generation. It's got 2 or 3 houses, outbuildings, etc. The budget has been just at the most massive shock for the farmer here, James Martin. In a moment I'm going to chat to him, and he's I have to say, in a pretty distressed state. So the big shock in the budget was inheritance tax on farmland handed down through the generations. Elon Musk overnight coming out hard, saying to the Labour government, don't do this, leave British farmers alone. James, this is a family farm.
Yep.
So you'll finish up with a situation when you inherit. What will you have to do?
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think the government have got this wrong. They don't understand the circumstances of family farms like this at all. They don't get it. And I think we've got to try and put as much pressure as we can on the government to change this, because as it is, it's going to wipe out a huge number of traditional family farms all over this country. I think it's wrong at every level.
In the video, Nigel Farage takes viewers on a visit to the farm of James Martin, a third-generation farmer whose family has worked this land for over a century. Farage dives straight into the discussion, pointing out that under Labour's new policy, farms like Martin's, asset-rich but cash-poor, are going to face an inheritance tax bill that they simply can't afford to pay without selling off land or vital equipment. Martin explains his predicament. His family farm spans 300 acres and includes a modest homestead and some outbuildings, all of which the Labour policy now considers taxable assets. It's not just a farm, it's our way of life, Martin tells Farage, the weight of frustration clear in his voice. He details how the proposed inheritance tax cap would leave his family with a bill topping £1 million, money that the farm's yearly income could never hope to cover. Martin goes on to reveal just how slim their margins really are. The farm grows a mix of crops, including cereals for the local market, but profit is tight. On paper, their assets look substantial, but in reality, it's a daily struggle to make ends meet. To support his family, Martin works as an on-call firefighter, putting in 120 hours of additional work each week. I love the farm and what it stands for, but it doesn't bring in enough for us to live comfortably, he explains, describing how selling even a few fields would strip his family of any hope of a viable income. Farage, visibly appalled, calls Labour's policy disgraceful and tone-deaf. He tells Martin, they think they're going after millionaires, but they're actually targeting people like you, working families who keep the countryside alive. According to Farage, this policy shows Labour's detachment from the realities of rural life, where farms may be worth millions on paper, but barely scrape by in cash flow. Adding another dimension to his argument, Farage reveals that even Elon Musk has spoken out against the policy, warning that it could jeopardise Britain's agricultural stability. Musk's comments have gone viral, and the international attention is amplifying Farage's calls for Labour to rethink their tax policy. As Farage and Martin walk the farm, Martin opens up about his family's history on the land. His grandfather, who worked on the farm well into his 90s, instilled in the family a strong sense of duty to keep the farm running. His father, now fighting cancer, had hoped to pass the farm on to Martin without the looming threat of inheritance tax. The thought of selling off part of the land to cover a tax bill, it feels like a betrayal of everything my family has worked for, Martin says. Farage doesn't hold back his reaction. This is an attack on tradition and on families who keep British farming alive, he says. We've got to put pressure on Labour to back down. This policy, as it stands, would destroy the livelihoods of farmers across the country. He insists that the policy is not only unfair but dangerous, as it could weaken the nation's food security by forcing small farms out of business. The interview doesn't end there. Farage presses Martin on the impact of Labour's policy if it goes through unchallenged. Martin lays it out clearly. We'd have to sell fields or equipment, and without those, we can't produce the same amount. We'd be left trying to survive on what's left. Farage promises Martin that he'll continue fighting for Britain's farmers, and he calls on his viewers to join in the battle by voicing their opposition to Labour's plan. The response has been immediate. Farmers and supporters across the UK are rallying around Farage's video, with many sharing their own stories of struggling to keep family farms running in an increasingly uncertain environment. Reform UK and other opposition figures are now calling for an urgent review of Labour's policy, arguing that the rural sector has been overlooked for too long. Labour, however, appears unmoved, with spokespersons insisting the policy is aimed at equity in the tax system. The party believes that asset-rich families should pay their fair share. Yet, within Labour itself, murmurs of dissent are beginning to surface, with some backbenchers reportedly uncomfortable with a policy that risks alienating a crucial voter base in rural areas. Meanwhile, in another controversial move, newly appointed Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has stirred the pot by dismissing the Partygate scandal as overblown. In her first major interview since succeeding Rishi Sunak, Badenoch defended Boris Johnson as a great Prime Minister and called the fines issued during Partygate a misstep. According to Badenoch, penalising everyday activities during the pandemic created a trap that harmed trust in government. Opposition figures, however, are firing back. Labour MP Paul Waugh criticised Badenoch's comments on social media, accusing her of being out of touch with the public's anger over Partygate. But Badenoch is pressing forward, insisting that the scandal is in the past and that it's time for the Tories to focus on solutions for today's problems. She also announced her intention to repeal Labour's recent tax on private school fees, calling it a tax on aspiration and framing it as another example of Labour's so-called war on success. Her remarks have sparked a new wave of debate, with Badenoch's supporters praising her strong stance against what they view as Labour's punitive tax policies. Critics, however, are calling it a dangerous gamble, as she risks alienating those who still feel angered by the Partygate scandal. If you want to stay up to date on this story and see how far Nigel Farage's fight for Britain's farmers will go, make sure to subscribe, give us a like, and stay tuned. The battle is far from over, and as Farage ramps up his campaign against Labour's inheritance tax policy, the political stakes keep rising. You won't want to miss a single twist in this explosive showdown.